And one last look at your traffic and weather for your ride in on this Thursday morning. Rainy, nasty out there, so be careful. Light accidents to report. One at Fair Road and I-77. One at 302 and 126, or I-26, excuse me. Another one at I-20 eastbound and 177. Another one at I-26 eastbound at Piney Grove. Mineral Springs at Laurel, and then St. Andrews at Broad River, as well as I-20 westbound at exit number 73. So be careful as you're making your way out there on the roadways on this nasty Thursday morning here on The Game. Oh, 9 o'clock on your Thursday morning. Welcome in to the Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jack Veltri. Disgusting Thursday morning at that. By the way, welcome back into the studio, Jack. Glad you hopefully got your car issues squared away.
Yeah, no, I'm all good now on my car. Again, it was just some engine electrical stuff that it got fixed. That's the important thing. We're here.
So it's expensive is what you're telling me.
I mean, a little. It was a little expensive. Not like too terrible, probably, honestly, but it probably could have been worse, honestly.
Anything involving vehicles is never cheap.
Exactly.
I think that's a lesson we've all learned the hard way.
Oh yeah. How's your car doing?
It's doing pretty good. Gotta get the dent resolved, but waiting for the other person's insurance company to call me back about when and where to go get that estimate done, and we'll go from there. Yeah. So it could have been worse. I'll say that much.
Yeah, it could have been worse. Just such a strange incident.
Speaking of could have been worse, can it get worse for men's basketball? Like, can it actually get worse, or are we just numb at this point?
I mean, you could go 0-18. I mean, that's the peak of getting worse. But no, man. I mean, the way they're losing these games, it's just. Honestly, I was telling Elijah last night, I think it's literally just a blur at this point. Like,
it feels that way. It feels.
It all clumps together.
It doesn't feel real. And with how close they've made these games, and we'll get into specifically what happened in just a moment, with how close they played so many of these games, in your mind, you're like, yeah, they're going to find a way to win one, right? They're going to stumble their way into a victory at some point between now and the end of the season, LSU, Arkansas, whoever it may be. But now I'm like, maybe they won't. Maybe they are actually going to go 0-18, which is a terrible thought to have, but I haven't seen enough otherwise to tell me that it can't happen.
I think they could beat LSU. Here's the thing about them, man. I think they're the best 0-11 team. Like
So Terry and I think it was last week, I actually went and looked at the other teams across the country that have not won a conference game. Green Bay was one of them, which that Gottlieb situation's a mess up there.
Yeah.
And there was a handful of others. And I think Carolina's actually the best of the bunch, but that's not exactly something you're going to hang a banner for.
Oh, no, definitely not. But what I'm saying is, they're competitive. That's the thing about them that people wonder. I don't see any quit in this team. They continue to play hard, and they take it down to the wire with these teams. Take yesterday as an example of that, losing only by 4 points to a top 20 team in the country. It's just you haven't been good enough to finish, right? It's like you just can't seal the deal for whatever reason, and this is the sixth game now where you've lost by 5 or less points, and it's just crazy. It's insane.
We'll dive into the specifics of what happened last night over at Colonial Life Arena against number 19 Ole Miss in just a second, but it is 9 o'clock. That means it's time for our Sandstorm Pick-Me-Up.
Time to get hyped.
Here's your 9 a.m. Sandstorm.
Sponsored by George Sink Injury Lawyers. Just call all nines.
It It's time for your 9 a.m. Sandstorm Pick Me Up, brought to you by South Carolina's largest injury law firm, George Sink Injury Lawyers. If you've been hurt in the car or at work, call George Sink now at 803 all nines. Last night, Colonial Life Arena 72-68. South Carolina falls to 0-11 in conference play to number 19 Ole Miss. Once again, a ranked team comes into CLA. It is a back and forth game, and in the final couple minutes, South Carolina falls apart and ends up losing by less than 5 points. It's a script we've seen written over and over and over again. And again, it's almost unbelievable that it keeps happening this exact same way every single time.
Mm-hmm. Yep. It's just it really, again, it's a blur, man. It all just like groups together because it's like these different outcomes. They're all basically the same. Like last night, it's you lose by 4 points, you miss 12 free throws. That's what it really came down to, is that so many of these missed free throws that came, especially early in the first half, like Nick Pringle missing 3 right out of the gate, and then South Carolina just ending up with 12 on the night. I mean, that's not going to be enough. And I mean, you went 12 of 17 at the line, but that's the difference right there. You make those 5 free throws in the second half, you're coming away with a win. But also at the same time, it's not just that. I think it's also Ole Miss had an unreal first half shooting performance. I mean, they shot 65% in the first half and just could not miss. So if you played defense on them or forced missed shots like you did in the second half, where Ole Miss is shooting 31% and you do that for the entire game, you're winning no problem. But it's just you ran into that and you missed free throws and you dug yourself into a hole that just, I mean, you came back, but it's hard to win when you're doing the little things, wrong.
And again, like we've talked about in some of these other games, Vanderbilt, you had 25 turnovers in that game, and you were still in a position in those last couple of minutes to potentially win the game. And that's the same thing last night, despite the fact that you were poor from the free throw line, despite the fact that Ole Miss shot the lights out in the first half, you were still in a position in those last couple of minutes to go out there and potentially win this game. And once again, it is mistakes being made. Colin Murray-Boyles, in an attempt to pass he's going to, the ball gets away from him and he gathers it back up and attempts to pass it, I think, to Zach Davis. And then the ball gets picked off. They go to the other end and get a layup. And then you're still down 1 point. You're down 3 points, on the last possession they had. CB's driving to the basket, kind of loses the handle on it, and can't get it back cleanly. And I don't put as much on Zach Davis for the errant pass he attempted to Jamari Thomas, because he's kind of going out of bounds there. But again, you're not holding on to the ball in a critical situation where you could have potentially gotten a layup and maybe gotten an and one as well.
It's the story of the year, man. Again, it's the same story, just a different night. And I mean, look, they're 0-11 in SEC play now, 7 games to go. I mean, I could see this team somehow getting a win. I think LSU next week is going to be their best bet. It's at Baton Rouge, but LSU is just not a good team, and neither is South Carolina. So something's got to give. And I don't know. I mean, you're missing this many free throws at the latter half of the season. I mean, this is something that hurt the team early in the year. I remember asking Lamont about it and stuff, and it's just like nothing's changed, man. It's just, and I know it's like, work on your free throws and stuff. You can only do so much to try to fix it. But at the end of the day, guys have got to make shots. I mean, it's killing you in these games.
And look, I imagine that at practice, they're probably doing great. They're probably making free throws. They're probably, passing the ball well. They're probably not turning the ball over at a high clip. It's something about when you get into these games, when the lights are on and the scoreboard's down to those final 1 to 2 minutes, that's where the execution just falls apart. And I know we've said this time and time again, but, Coach Parrish isn't on the court. He's not the one dribbling, passing, shooting, or any of those things. His playing days are long gone. It is on him to make sure that the players are prepared, but at the end of the day, it comes down to execution, and these guys are just not executing.
No, not at all. I mean, it's like, I don't know. It's just tough to see, man. It's like outside of Colin Murray-Boyles, it's a struggle. Like your guard play, I mean, I don't know. It's far too inconsistent. I think you only had like 12 points in the first half from your guards, and then Jamari Thomas turns it up a little bit in the second half. But even then, he shot 3 of 13 last night. Like, again, you need more from everyone on this team, and you got to do the little things right, because you're not going to be able to win games if you're not making your free throws and whatnot.
Now, it was more of a mess when Jamari Thomas was out with his injury for a couple weeks. It certainly felt like that. And since he's come back, the turnovers have not been, I guess, as crazy for the team as a whole, but his shooting has been abysmal these past couple games. Let's go back to the past 3 games. 4 of 13 from the field against A&M, 3 of 12 versus Kentucky, 3 of 13 last night against Ole Miss. And look, he's a shoot first type of point guard. That's what he is. You're not going to be able to change that about him. But man, it's not there right now.
No, and you don't have that other guy on the team that can go out there and is going to get you buckets. It's not like the continued reference to Talon Cooper and Michi Johnson. Like, Michi was your shooting guard that would have games like this where he'd go 3 of 13, maybe score. I mean, there was games where he went like 0 of 11, I think, from the field, and had a really rough night. But you could always depend on the other guy, Cooper, to get you some buckets. You just don't have that this year. It's not even close. So when Collins, your best guy, and he took 14 shots last night, but LP wants him to take more than that. And the guys on the team know he can take more than that. When he's only taking 14 shots, getting 20 points, and then Jamari has the night he has, and then no one else really around him is doing much, it creates a little bit of an issue. So
yeah, and again, we know what this team is at this point. It's frustrating to watch. I would, in a way, just rather have them getting beat by, 15, 20 points night in, night out, or you can say, yeah, we're just not very good because, we're at least losing by a bunch. But when you're in these games so close and so tight, and every single time we're talking about, all right, today it was free throws, this time it was turnovers, today it was this, today it was that. It's just, you want to beat your head against a wall.
No, it just gets, again, it's literally like honestly, man, like I just don't remember like some of the moments last night. It's just like, because it's all the same.
It runs together.
Exactly.
I was saying, to me, for every game, you can forget what happens in the first 37 to 38 minutes. If you just want to watch what really it comes down to, watch the final 2 minutes of each and one of these games they've lost close, and you'll see what happens. Say, okay, well, there it was. Free throws, missed, turnovers, not making this, not making that. Like, again, it's routine. It's every single night.
And another thing that we haven't even talked about yet, I just don't understand why, that 3-point shot that Malik Dia hit, Ole Miss's big man, I mean, why are you leaving him wide open at the top of the key? I know for obvious reasons he's not a guy that, by the numbers, probably isn't a good 3-point shooter. But guess what? You leave a guy open from 3-point range, it's literally like a shoot around.
Well, and he was on a heater. He scored 12 points at one point.
He had already made a 3 earlier in the game. Why are you leaving him open? And that is the difference in the game right there, because you're down by 3 and you cut it to 1, and then you go back down. It's like you're trailing the rest of the game, man. It's just, I don't know. There's so many things you got to figure out, and you play Florida on Saturday.
It doesn't get any better.
It doesn't get any easier. I mean, I don't know, man. I don't know. I think, I hate to say it, but I think we're getting real close here to looking at if they don't beat LSU next week, that's the one game I'm very sure they can win. But other than
that game's
man,
on the road. Road games are tough in the
road games.
If they're going to win, it's going to come at home. You don't have any more ranked opponents at home. You got Texas, Arkansas, and Georgia. That's probably where your win's going to come from, if I had to imagine. But it's not a walk in the park.
No, it's not a guarantee
at all.
Again,
these are all tournament caliber teams for the most part. I know Arkansas has kind of been bouncing back and forth between being in and being out, but still, in consideration, that's how good the league is this year. So you're going to have to try and beat, at some point, outside of LSU, a tournament caliber team if you want to get that win.
You're going to have to find a way to play a complete game. I mean, that's the only way you're going to be able to do it. I mean, you've played pretty well during these close losses, but man, it's just, for whatever reason, it's never enough. And I think it's just, maybe they run out a little bit out of ammo near the end of the game. Maybe they just can't finish. I'm not sure.
We'll hear from Coach Paris what he had to say last night after the game, and including what do you even say to the team at this point? Because I'm very curious, because you can go to your book of inspirational speeches and quotes and all that kind of stuff, and he's probably exhausted every single one of them at this point. So we'll hear what Coach Paris had to say about that after last night's game. It is the Extra Point. Reminder, tomorrow, baseball opening day. We're going to be out from 12 until 3:45 at the Village Idiot on Whaley Street for the Schroeder's Towing Roadshow, getting you set for South Carolina and Sacred Heart first pitch at 4 o'clock tomorrow right here on the Game. It is the Extra Point, Tyler Head and Jack Beltry on your Thursday on the Game. Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jack Belcher along with you here on your Thursday morning on the game, unpacking what happened last night over at Colonial Life Arena as the men's basketball team suffered their 11th straight loss, all in conference play, this time to number 19, Ole Miss. Have you ever had to, give a speech in a locker room or motivate a team at any point in your athletic career?
No, because I probably wasn't good enough.
See, I was never that kind of person either. I was, I'm a good listener, and, I can take motivation, but in terms of, me being the one to, punch a locker and fire everybody up, that wasn't really me. You know what I mean?
No.
And like Coach Paris has such a calm demeanor about him. I don't think he's the guy that screams and yells. And look, I'm sure there's shouting and things at practice when you're in the intensity of that, but he seems pretty even keel. But if I was him, and had to walk into this locker room after suffering our 11th straight loss, where we're seeing the same things happen over and over again, I feel like I'd lose my mind.
I mean, yeah. I mean, how can you being in his shoes right now? It's got to be tough, man, because you're dealing with not only that, but you're dealing with a fan base that's just very unhappy with what's going on right now. And I mean, you feel sorry for these players. Honestly, it's like, what do you even say to them after just repeatedly coming up short?
Before we hear from Coach Paris, how does the fan base react when this team's walking on and off the floor? Are they still are there boos as they're leaving the arena floor after games?
No.
What's the reaction?
No, you know what, man? Well, honestly, if you want me to be real, it's just they're already on their way out. I mean,
they're like, oh, okay, it happened again.
As soon as Zach Davis's turnover happened with 6 seconds left to go, so many people had just gotten up and left. I mean, I haven't heard boos really at all, honestly.
Okay. Because some people, if it's a fan base, I'm not saying this happens here at Carolina, but you'll see some fan bases that kind of turn on a team. That, this happens in football a lot. If you feel like they didn't play a good first half, you boo them as they go in the locker room. Those kind of things happen. So, and I didn't think it was happening here with men's basketball, but you're obviously at all the home games. So I was intrigued to hear your thoughts because, if people were turning on this team, I'm not saying I wouldn't blame them because, again, you're seeing the same things happen over and over again.
Well, here's the thing. I quite honestly, I just don't think there's enough people who care. I mean, the arena was not even half full last night. Probably half full in the lower bowl, man. It was just, I looked back at a photo from about a year ago when they played LSU in that horrendous game that they lost. And it's just, that arena was full. And last night wasn't even close. I mean, it's just how much of a drop-off it's been just this season. But in terms of fan turnout, I mean, it's they only show up when you win. It's crazy.
Well, like we talked about yesterday, at this point, a year ago, halfway through February, man, even because what they lost the LSU game, and they'd lost, I think, 2 in a row at that point in time. And that was the worst point of the regular season.
Oh, yeah.
But still, it's oh, hey, they're a projected 7 seed. And then here's where they sit in the SEC standings. Things were great because you were playing for something. You were building towards something. Now you're not. Now you're literally in the last 7 games of your conference slate saying, gosh, I hope we can win one of these.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, how can this happen, though, is the bigger question. How could you go from such a good year last year to just, I mean, how could I don't want to say Lamont let this happen, but it's just, how seriously, how could it happen is the question, man. It's insane.
Let's hear what Coach Paris said last night after the game about what do you even say to the team at this point when you've lost 11 in a row?
Yeah. It's uncharted territory for me also. Particularly to have a team, I say this to our guys, I think they know this. I say this to our guys that, this stinks for me between now and I'll watch the game tonight, I'll watch it again in the morning, make the edits, and then at some point move forward to start preparing for the next game. And once I do that, I start watching the other team, I look at us, I look at what we do, I look at what they do well, and I come into practice ripping and roaring and very confident in our ability to win the game based on what my eyes see, nothing else. That continues to be what I do. Not so that I can get through this, because that's genuine belief in what our ability to win a game looks like. each time. But yeah, so I keep making the golf analogy, and 18 holes in a golf round and 18 games in the conference, and we had a good drive. We put the ball in the fairway. We were green in regulation. After our second shot, I had a long putt for birdie. Lagged it to 4 feet, 3 feet, 4 feet maybe, and weren't able to come through at a par. So it's I actually use that analogy with them. I'm sure some guys probably don't understand most of that, but I use enough of them that probably do. But anyway, I feel for them. I let them know that, I'm in this with them, but I have less impact on how it goes than what they do.
What do you think this team would be better at? Free throw shooting or putting?
Probably neither, to be honest. They'd probably be about the same as what they are right now with free throws. But if I'm picking one, free throws, you can be good some games, but others, it's like this.
Sure. And I know, so the weird thing about last night's game is how involved Benjamin Bozeman's Verdonk was. Was that career high in points?
He played 20 minutes last night.
Played 20 minutes. And look, you're at a point where try something and see if it works. And I'm assuming BBV getting more minutes was a part of that. Nick Pringle, I was impressed with a lot of things he was doing, minus getting to the free throw line. It ends up that those guys end up taking almost half of the free throws, and they both end up missing a combined 8 of them.
Yeah, it's I don't know. I was glad to see BBV got minutes though. He gives great effort, man. More than anyone on this team without question. And look, did you see that one play where he went up for that dunk and his head slammed on the ground, man? It's
got the nice behind the back. I think that was assist to CMB.
Yeah.
Good highlight. And he's a physical presence. Dude's looks like the Incredible Hulk out there.
Yeah.
And you just assume man, he's gonna be dominant. He hasn't been up to this point, but again, when you're in this situation, why not give it a try? And I'd say it worked for the most part, but he came up short when he got to the line.
Yeah, he's not your scoring type of big man by any means. He's not like CMB in that sense. But the one thing you can never question, again, it's the effort, and he's going to be able to get you some rebounds. So he does a lot of other things right. It's just he's not your scoring type of forward.
And, if somebody else wants to put Jamari Thomas in a headlock, he can be your enforcer to make sure that doesn't happen.
How did that dude not get ejected last night?
That was the wildest sequence.
How did that dude
right?
not get
Because, again, he holds on to Thomas for really long. And, so Zach Davis also gets the technical because it's a double tech. So they essentially cancel out. But, he just, he said something to him. I don't know what he said, but I feel sticking up for your teammate to say, hey, don't do that is a little different than actually physically having your arm wrapped around someone's neck.
Yeah.
That's just my thought.
It's insane. It's how can you, I'm in a chokehold, man. What are you doing? Or a headlock. What are you doing?
Yeah, their biggest player on your essentially smallest player.
Yeah. And it's Zach, everyone was kind of shouting back and forth at each other, but I guess the refs, were right next to Zach and they probably heard something.
I guess if you use certain words, then that would quantify it, because we don't know what he said. And he didn't put his hands on him in retaliation. He said something to him, again, sticking up for his teammate. But I guess within whatever he said, there was probably something that crosses a line, I guess, in the opinion of the officials.
Yeah, but putting a guy in wrapping your arms around someone's neck isn't crossing the line, I guess.
Well, gosh, they blew whistles for everything else last night, so why not?
Too many fouls called.
I can't stand foul heavy officiating crews. On Sunday with the women's basketball team, they got better as the game went along, but that first quarter was disastrous because it just had no flow. Basketball's a game with flow, right? You got your media timeouts and all that kind of stuff. And yes, if there's a legitimate foul, sure. But man, you get 3 feet within somebody and they're calling fouls for it. And I think it was fair on both sides. I'm not saying that it was skewed one or the other, but I like basketball games to flow. And that last night's games did not flow.
Let them play, man. It's just, I don't know. But, hey, it is what it is. And, last night was just a weird game, man.
Well, if South Carolina does win a game at home this year, people might be tempted, whoever's in attendance, to storm the court. There's a athletic director in the SEC that's trying to prevent those kind of things from happening. We'll discuss that coming up next. It is The Extra Point. Tyler Ed and Jack Beltry along with you on your Thursday on the game. Tyler Head for our friends over at Canty Foundation Specialist. I don't know if you've looked outside yet this morning, but it is absolutely disgusting out there. Tons of heavy rain as I was driving in on Gervais Street. The sidewalk's starting to flood a little bit, so a lot of rain happening here in the Midlands. And if you have an open crawl space under your home and are experiencing a storm like this one, you might end up with some standing water under there. High humidity and condensation in that crawl space will create things like mold and mildew. It's going to lead to things like wood rot and floor joist problems, and can even affect the health of your family, because about half the air that you breathe comes from your crawl space. That's where our friends at Canty Foundation Specialists come in. Go online to schedule an appointment today at cantyconvicts.com. They'll send a professional out to your home to evaluate your crawl space and make sure it gets fixed so you and your family can live without worry going forward. Again, go online to schedule an appointment today at cantyconvicts.com for our friends at Canty Foundation Specialists. Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jack Belcher along with you. Carolina calls the Coach Paris coming up tonight at 6 o'clock here on the game in Columbia and 100.3 the game out in Myrtle Beach. The women's team looking to get back on its feet after the loss to Texas on Sunday. They take on Florida tonight over at CLA. Pregame coverage for that at 6:30 with the tip at 7 on our sister station, 98.5 WOMG. Jack, I love court storming and field storming. It is what makes college sports unique and special because there's no other sport in the world or sports league in the world that allows these kind of things to happen. And it's something that if you're in college and you got to run on the field at Willie B for this past year against Texas A&M or against Kentucky last year in basketball on the court, it's a memory you're going to have forever and something that, again, makes college sports so unique. What are your thoughts on court/field storming?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's it's something that's definitely evolved over the years. Remember, I mean, back in the day, man, like back in like the 70s and 60s or whatever, like in pro sports, you could just storm the field, court, anytime. It was insane. Like at a World Series game, NBA Finals, like you could do it whenever. And now it's like the only, areas you could do it are in college, and it's definitely cool. Like the A&M game earlier this year, it was definitely insane seeing the hedges after the game just be absolutely shredded down. And I mean, shoot, when I was a student at USC, I remember storming the field after the Tennessee game. It was cool. So and then obviously the Kentucky game last year. So it's always fun seeing everyone have a good time.
Yeah, and look. I'm going to play this clip from Greg Byrne, who's the athletic director at Alabama, who has thrown out an interesting proposal. And he said this before, but he's reiterated this point here recently as we've seen a rush of these things happen across the college basketball landscape with how crazy the season's been so far, particularly in the SEC. And it's a crazy idea, but at the same time, I understand where he's coming from. Here's what Greg Byrne said his solution to stopping court/field storming would be.
I think from a safety standpoint, keeping people off the fields and the courts is a good thing for everybody involved. If we said that the home team, if they storm the field or the court, they're going to lose that game right then and there, that will stop it. I'm not overly optimistic and understand it's not a popular opinion in a lot of people's view. I'll get criticized for it. That's okay. I do believe in it. And if somebody can come up with something more that's a better idea that does not include that, I'm all for it. I'm not saying that's the only possible way. I'm convinced in my own simple mind that that would be something that would stop it. Let's celebrate up in the stands. Let's have a great environment. I'd even be fine if you say, hey, let's give it 3 minutes to get the team off the field. And then if they want to come down and celebrate, great.
I understand where he's coming from. Because he's, again, the athletic director at Alabama. He's looking at this from a liability standpoint and obviously a financial standpoint in reference to the fact that if you do this, you do have to pay a fine, and it goes up the more times you do it. Now, he's also in the position at the University of Alabama where they have a really good football team and they have a really good basketball team. So if they lose to whoever and the field gets stormed, like against Vanderbilt or whatever, and suddenly they're forfeiting, that team has to forfeit wins, guess who that benefits? Alabama, because, again, they're in a position where that kind of thing can happen to them quite a bit. But he brings up a really interesting point. And yes, there are safety concerns when these two things happen, but I don't know what you can come up with that is going to prevent people from doing this.
That's the thing. It's really hard to prevent people from doing it. His idea is, let the teams get off the court and stuff, and then if you want to come down after like 3 minutes, go ahead and celebrate. Like that's his solution. I think that's for a safety. Yes, that works. But think about it like South Carolina, for instance. Think about if that were the case. You know how security is here. They yellow rope off everything. You got security all line of police officers, etc. After a big game, you're not going to be able to get down to the floor if it's already like 3 minutes past. Like everyone's already leaving them by that point.
Well, technically speaking, you're not supposed to be on the field or the court as a fan anyway.
Exactly.
Like that is not supposed to happen. Let's go back to the A&M game. That was the first time I'd ever been there for something like that happening. They flashed the message on the video board, and they have the guy come over the PA and say, remember, fans, you're not supposed to be on the field and all that kind of stuff. But when you see the hordes of people in the thousands, piling up around the hedges, well, good luck to the 12 security guards in front of them from some of those people down. If they want to get on the field, they're going to get on the field.
Yeah, and so from a safety standpoint, I understand it because you don't want people to get hurt. Like, who was it? I think it was like Caitlin Clark a few years ago from Iowa that got like trampled or something.
Somebody ran, or she was walking off and like ran into someone, someone ran into her. What I think it was a Duke player recently that got caught up in the swarm.
There was that, and then I think Kyle Filipowski from Duke as well.
Last year.
Yeah, I think he got like knocked down or something. So it's like you don't want people to get hurt, and honestly, with fans too. Fans get probably the worst of it because they're always getting hurt. Like I've heard the stories of people just, getting knocked down and stuff like at the football game or whatever, and they can't get up or whatever, and it's like it's tough. It's a tough situation, but that's the risk you take doing it. Number one, so I think there's always going to be risk involved. You need like a measure to get the players and teams off the court appropriately, specifically the visiting team. But I think you should still be allowed to do it, and. I still think it's ridiculous that the SEC fines these schools for doing it. It's like...
Well, you have to do something as a league to show that you're trying to discourage it, right? Because you can't just throw your hands up and say, oh, well, it's going to happen. Like, again, from a logistics and legal standpoint, you have to make some kind of concerted effort to try. And if you ask anybody that stormed the field last year against A&M or a couple years ago against Tennessee, if any of them had a single thought of, I wonder how much money this is going to cost the University of South Carolina, I would guarantee you not a single person did. Yeah, no. It's just, and you pay it to the other school, which is the other thing, too. And again, that's part of the discouragement. Like, you're going to have to pay this money to the other school. Again, no fan cares about that. Nobody is thinking about that in the moment of celebrating what is obviously a huge win if you're trying to get out there on the court of the field. Yeah, exactly. And again, the other thing is it's not their money, so they could care less. But and who knows what these schools are even putting that money towards. But it doesn't happen all too often either. Like for South Carolina, for football, I can't even think of the last time it had happened before these last two instances. And then basketball, they tried storming the court a few years ago against Kentucky when they beat them on the Cousinard buzzer beater, but it just never ended up happening because security, credit to them, they do a pretty good job of doing their job. So sure. Yeah, it's one of those things that you have to have a good amount of people with the same idea to make it work. Because, again, if one person runs out on the court, and guess what? They're going to get snatched up. I think it was after the Missouri game that a couple people tried to run on the field. There were at least there was a handful
50
of people.
Like it was.
Well, and it gets to the point. You hope that big wins don't have you wanting to storm the field of the court because you just get used to it, right? If you're a program that never beats anybody big and you finally beat somebody big, okay, fine. But if you beat enough quality opponents consecutively, or for the most part, and you say, it's just another win. It's not a big deal.
Let's just put it out there, though. Can we make a prediction? If South Carolina does win at home this year, first win of the SEC play, they got to be storming the court, right?
See, that's an interesting question because you're either doing it against Texas, Arkansas, or Georgia. Again, technically tournament teams or tournament, considerations at this point in time. That'd be kind of sad. You know what I mean?
But this season's been sad.
The season has been sad. And here's the thing. If you did do that against one of those teams, there might be so few people in the audience that security might be able to wrangle them up.
Yeah, exactly. Like again, unless students pack it out, it's gonna be tough to do that. So we'll see.
Yeah, and again, I understand where Greg Burns coming from his position of power there at Alabama. I do think it's convenient that he suggests forfeiting because guess what? That would benefit him because that'd give his team a win.
Yep.
But I don't think we should go that far.
No, that is insane. Just find him more money if you want to.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. But in my estimation, court/field storming is not going away anytime soon. We'll wrap up hour number one of the Extra Point. A former superstar in college football is returning to his alma mater, and it begs the question of who is your go-to highlight guy growing up when it came to the sport of college football. That's coming up next. It is The Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jack Beltry along with you on your Thursday on The Game. And welcome back in. It is The Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jack Beltry along with you on your Thursday here on The Game. Saw this yesterday, and it made me think back to when I was a kid in like elementary school / middle school. Pat White is returning to West Virginia as an assistant on Rich Rodriguez's new staff there. Of course, Rich Rodriguez was his coach there back in the mid-2000s when West Virginia was one of the hottest teams in college football. 3 straight 10-plus win seasons, a Sugar Bowl victory, a trip to the Fiesta Bowl in there as well as they were kind of one of those BCS buster type of teams, coming out of the powerful Big East there, and they actually beat Georgia in that 2005 Sugar Bowl, and a lot of that had to do with Pat White at quarterback running the Wildcat, which at the time was a very new and innovative concept in all of football, and they threw guys for a loop. Him and Steve Slayton were just highlight monsters back then.
Yeah, I mean, Pat White was just unreal. I mean, an absolute legend out in Morgantown, and one of the most exciting players to watch back in the day. I mean, again, a man ahead of his time, in my opinion.
Yeah, and look, as the game, moved along, everybody caught up to the Wildcat, and it isn't this novel concept anymore. But for a while there, Rich Rod was cooking, and Pat White was the perfect quarterback to run that there.
Yeah. I mean, those WVU teams were special, and Pat White was the big part of that.
And I believe Geno Smith came in right after him.
Pat White was 2005 to 07.
Yes.
Geno, because I remember Geno was there when WVU beat Clemson. Like, they smacked them in that Orange Bowl. I think it was like 20, and Geno got drafted like 2012, 2013. So there's someone, I think, in between Pat and Geno.
Let's see here. Okay, yeah, I didn't realize he was there that late. Okay, yeah, so he was at West Virginia from 09 to 13. So, yeah, a little bit of a gap in between.
Like a 1 year gap.
Yeah, a 1 year gap in between. And Rich Rodriguez had already moved on to Michigan at that point in time. So, different regime. But, West Virginia was obviously a very highly thought of program at that point in time. And it begged the question to me, because, again, Pat White was just a highlight machine back in the day. Who was your, go-to college highlight player? It doesn't have to be a Carolina player or whatever. Who you just love watching highlights of if you ever get the opportunity?
Well, I think the easy answer here, and I think this is the one that is probably the most common, it's Tavon Austin, another fellow West Virginia guy. I mean, that dude's highlight reel still gets talked about to this day.
Sure. And
it's insane how good of a player he was in college, and I really do wish it translated over better to the NFL. He had a long enough career in the NFL to it's like okay, he made it worth it, but he wasn't that type of player that he was in college. But for me, other than that, that's the most basic answer I think you can pick. I think, obviously, Johnny Football, man. Johnny Manziel's highlights, man. It's just unreal how good he was, especially in that 2012 season. And then I think another guy, Reggie Bush. I mean, back in the day, around the same time as Pat White, too. So one of the most prolific, if not the most prolific running back in the sport.
And Tavon Austin was there with Geno Smith during all those years at West Virginia, so they kind of had the same kind of deal that Pat White and Steve Slayton had, a couple years before. To me, Johnny Football's number one. Johnny Football is legitimately probably my favorite college football player of all time. He was so fun to watch, and I get it. He was a knucklehead off the field. And I heard him on a podcast recently where he's like, I'd go get tore up with the baseball team on Thursday night. I'd be hungover at the walkthrough. And as long as I was awake on Saturday, I was good to go. It's unreal the life he lived and how well he still played. If he would have focused all his attention on football, he could have been unstoppable. You know what I mean? He was that good, only giving about 50% effort.
I got a feeling if he were in the league now, I think you would see a different type of dude. I just hear him in interviews and stuff and doing his podcasts and stuff. I don't know what goes on behind the scenes with him. I'm sure he still parties a little bit and whatnot, but he seems a lot more mature now for his age and stuff. And it's a shame it never worked out for him with the Browns in the NFL and stuff. It would have. I think it's one of the bigger what ifs, honestly.
I only ever got to talk to Dow Loggins one time when we had him on our show last year at Pro Day. I wish I could have gotten some Manziel stories out of him, because I imagine he was probably a headache to deal with.
Oh man,
when they were with the Browns.
That first year, as soon as he as soon as he walks on stage at draft day and he puts up the money signs, it's like, I mean, the Browns. I don't think they knew what they were getting themselves into.
But I admired the cockiness in college.
Oh yeah,
he backed it up.
Yeah, he was a great player.
He was arrogant, but man, he was fun to watch. And again, he benefited. He was just the best athlete on the field. And, he didn't go through his progressions. He didn't read defenses very well. But he said, all right, Mike Evans isn't open. I'm going to cut off and run. And that usually worked.
Man, he was unreal, man. It's just Such a good player to watch. It's a shame it never worked out the next level. But again, there's so many other. Are there any other players that stick out to you?
Devonta Smith, when he was
That's
at
a
Alabama,
good one. That 2020 season was
his Heisman year was
unreal,
ridiculous. I mean, legitimately, there was nobody that could cover him. That whole Alabama team was crazy. But like him specific, that wide receiver room when he had Mechie and Henry Ruggs and all that kind of stuff, and he was head and shoulders
Jerry
better.
Jeudy too.
Jerry Jeudy up next with Wes Mitchell here on the game. Hey.
What's going on, guys? It's Jack here. When it comes to HVAC replacements, AAA Heating and Air has your back. They offer guaranteed financing, 12 months with no payments or interest, and a 15-year warranty on parts and labor. If you need a new system, they're the best in the Midlands. But what if you don't need a replacement? What if you just need a repair? Good news for you. AAA Heating and Air has you covered there, too. They offer up to 12-month payment plans on repairs with no credit check for homeowners who need repairs. Just have a valid bank account, and they'll handle the rest. So whether you need a replacement or repair, AAA and Heating and Air has unbeatable options. You can call today, and you get your comfort back. So go ahead and give a call to AAA Heating and Air, and they'll get you right.
It's 10 o'clock on your Thursday morning. Welcome in is the Gamecock Club Hour presented by Krantz Cooling and Heating. Tyler Head, Wes Mitchell returning to Columbia, South Carolina. We'll get the Nashville stories from you and Chris a little bit later on in the morning. But welcome back. The weather's nasty, but man, we are one day away from baseball getting rolling tomorrow. The Gamecocks and Sacred Heart starting the Paul Mainieri era. I don't know about you, Wes. I'm excited.
I'm ready, man. I'm ready to hear what Stewart has to say to us here, and I'm ready to see what, in many ways, is a brand new team. See what they have in store for us.
We do head out to Love Chevrolet phone lines. Welcome back in from the Gamecocks Radio Network. Stuart Lake, who'll be on the call for that game coming up tomorrow. Stuart, appreciate your time as always. And we just said there, we're very excited. What's your level of excitement for the start of a new season tomorrow?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me back on. But, yeah, just super excited. I feel like I've been a weather guy for the last 3 or 4 days. But fortunately, it looks like it's turning our way a little bit tomorrow. So just a huge weekend planned, and to get to see Coach Mainieri run out on that field, I know for his first game, I've just seen his excitement building. So I'm ready for it.
Stuart, great to hear your voice again, man. Ready to get this thing started as well. And so every coach has their kind of own approach, and you've been around a lot of ball in your life. What has maybe just caught your attention about Coach Mainieri in general? It seems to me like he walks the line very well between being one of the most genuinely nice people I feel like I've ever met, but also he kind of tells it like it is, too. There's an old school approach, I feel like, when he talks about the guys. You kind of know where you stand with him, I feel like. But what have you noticed?
Well, I've certainly noticed that. And when you look at his pedigree, I mean, gosh, his dad, to me, probably the best junior college coach in the history of junior college baseball. They're both in the Hall of Fame. And, you know, it's fun for me because he reminds me of my coaches. He's very clear with the players on what he expects. But what I'm so impressed with, and it's obviously from the people he's, just been around his whole life, he's so positive. He's not a guy that is telling you the truth while trying to put you down. He's telling you the truth of how you need to get better, and he's got such a resume of success that it'd be kind of hard not to listen to when he's telling you things. So I have just enjoyed. I've been to a ton of practices, especially this spring, really just because I love seeing how he interacts with the players and how he just really is working every day to develop them.
And, Stuart, I don't think we've talked to you since this hire was made. It kind of came out of left field for a lot of us when they decided to bring Coach Mainieri on. What was your initial thought when they decided to hire him? And, what was your excitement level when that hire was made and compared to where we're at now, just a day away from opening day?
Well, there's no doubt. I was hearing all kinds of different names as that process was going on. His was not one of them. So when Coach Tanner did kind of tell me, hey, I might be going this way, I was excited because I like to consider myself an SEC guy. For my years of starting in this league, I got to coach over a dozen years in this league, and he was a guy, Coach Mainieri, when we played them, you wanted to go say hello. You wanted to watch their BP, or you wanted to watch what they were doing. So for me, as a baseball guy, to now get to see that on a day-to-day basis, I'm over here probably more than they probably want me over here because I just love watching how the process works.
Stuart, the weekend rotation, at least official for week one now. Obviously, you got a couple of guys there off the top, Dylan Eskew, Matthew Becker, that have paid their dues, and from what I understand, have maybe thrown a couple of different pitches, kind of have made a couple little changes. What do you expect from these two guys? Do you think these are two of these players that could follow that trend we see, where a guy at kind of the latter part of his career figures it out and can be that maybe veteran at the front of this pitching staff for Carolina?
I certainly do. And the reason I like, once this got announced, obviously I still think Eli Jersenbeck's going to be a huge part of this pitching staff. I think we all know that. And probably midway through the year, he might be right back starting the weekend. But Coach Mainieri's press conference he had maybe a month ago now, he said several times in that press conference how old the SEC is right now because of COVID era, still letting guys play till 24 years old and maybe older. And I just really felt when he kept saying that, I could see a veteran staff early. And that's what we have in SQ now in Becker Friday, Saturday. It's just two guys that you really feel like you know what you're going to get. And that's huge starting out, and it'll be really special this weekend because there's so much going on. You'd like to have that veteran guy that doesn't get distracted by Jackie Bradley walking through the dugout and Whit Merrifield running across the infield and all that's going to be going on this weekend. So I like this starting rotation. Put McCoy in there on Sunday, but no doubt Eli Jersenbeck going to be a big part of this once all said and done.
Again, talking to Stuart Lake, will be on the call for Gamecock baseball starting tomorrow with the opening game against Sacred Heart at 4 o'clock here on the game. Coach Mary the other day was on with Jay and Elijah on our afternoon show and talked about that rotation and says, we expect to pitch to contact a lot, not expecting a high level of strikeouts. Of course, last year, defense was a concern with this team. From what you've seen so far through preseason scrimmages and everything, is the defense going to be good enough to back up a lot of balls getting put in play?
I think so, and if you go to their practices, boy, what a just an emphasis on infield defense. The outfield, you see them work so much on cutting balls off down the line and keeping a single, not letting an extra base, because they do realize that. A little different pitching staff. Could still end up having good numbers, but I don't think you have that wipeout arm unless it turns into Jersenbeck. So there's going to be balls put in play with this team, and you see it in their practice. They put an emphasis on infield defense. And the outfield defense that I've noticed is really making sure to get balls back in quickly. So that's been a big thing I've seen in the preseason.
Stuart, those Coach Tanner defenses always seems like we're just so strong up the middle. I know Henry Kazmar comes in. I've heard as like Coach Maneri's, like this was his guy that he saw in the transfer portal. He said, hey, go get my shortstop. I'm pretty excited as a middle infield guy myself to watch Kazmar. What have you seen from him, both in terms of what he can maybe bring to the top of this lineup, being an on-base guy, and then playing some shortstop for this team?
Yeah, defensively first, just really good hands. I was fortunate yesterday. I had lunch with Coach Tanner and one of our former players, and we're talking about guys through the years. And, we certainly don't want to put pressure on Henry here, but Adam Everett type hands with this kid. I mean, I go out and I watch ground balls and I watch scrimmages, and it seems like he never gets a bad hop. Well, the reason is his hands. And that's what Adam Everett and Brian Roberts and those type guys that we had here, they just made those plays look simple, and that's what he does. And that then makes the rest of your defense so much better on the infield, because if you're watching him, you can learn from him, or it can motivate you to, hey, I got to get my hands here. I got to get my feet. So I think he is going to be a really fun guy defensively to watch. And every scrimmage I've been at, he's kind of hitting that two-hole. So he's obviously a guy that's going to be really important to the offense, because we all know with Ethan most likely stepping into that three-hole every day. Boy, that 1 and 2 are going to be really important to what he gets to do.
Again, talking to Stuart Lake here on the Gamecock Club Hour presented by Krantz Cooling and Heating. This year you're going to move Talmadge LeCroy behind the plate in that catcher spot. That spot that is obviously occupied by Cole Messina the past couple of years. And look, Cole Messina was known as the heart and soul of this team, the vocal veteran leader. Who's going to be that guy this year? Who's going to step up and be the one that's leading the rest of this team as we enter this new era with Paul Maneri?
Well, that's a great question, and one I had yesterday with someone close to the program. I'm not sure. I think it's set up to be Ethan Petrie, but I don't know if that's kind of his forte. Ethan is a grinder, show up day to day and do by example. So that's going to be fun for me, too, to see how that kind of shakes out. But you mentioned a couple games already. Maybe it's Kazman doing it. Maybe Talmadge LeCroy, I know, wants to have that role, and he gets to be in that catcher role. So as I always told my catchers when I coached them, you're the only guy that the other 8 are looking at. You can get away with bad body language in left field. You can even pout a little bit at second base. You can as a catcher, because everybody's looking at you. So he has embraced that, I know, this fall. So maybe Talmadge might be that guy that steps up here to lead early, but I think there's some other good options as the year goes on. Nathan Hall, he might be. That guy's really impressed me all fall and all spring.
I was about to actually ask Stuart, looking at what I guess is kind of a projected lineup, and it does seem like there's enough depth on this team. Maybe who trots out there tomorrow, could be different in 3 weeks or whatever. But a very interesting mix to me between, like, you got your Petries, Kennedy Jones is back, Blake Jackson's back, but then you look at it, Nathan Hall in terms of newcomers, Dalton Mashore, Nolan Naraki, KJ Scobie, the freshman. Is there anybody among the newcomers that just has kind of piqued your interest where you're going, let me circle that guy for later?
Well, listening to the coaches freshman-wise, KJ Scobie, that name keeps popping up when we just talk. I think he's one. And to play third in this league is hard as a freshman. So that'll be one I've definitely got circled. But a guy that has just drawn my attention from just sitting in the stands or sitting up in the booth watching them play, Dalton Mashore, I think, is going to be a big part of this offense. He is just so mature. You watch BP, he just always has a good BP, has good at bat. I think wherever he fits in, whether it be in right field or maybe some days DHing, I think Mashore is going to be a guy we talk about. But Nolan Naraki, that dude's played. And you can see his presence when he's on the field. He's kind of had to miss some with that little bit of an injury early, but the last few weekends he's been out there. And when he's out there, it just kind of solidified what I thought was their lineup. So it's going to be really cool to watch these guys develop here early on with these games.
Speaking of that development, let's put your coach hat on here. We start SEC play pretty much a month from tomorrow against Oklahoma, but in these series against Sacred Heart, against Milwaukee, against Morehead State, what are you looking for as a coach to maybe see from a development standpoint or adjustment standpoint before you get into the onslaught that's going to be the SEC?
Yeah, you've got 26 games beside those 30. Those 30, you just set them over here because they're going to be dogfights. You've got to take care of your business in these 26. And what I mean by that, you got to get your wins. I would be very honest with hitters when I was here coaching. Hey, this is when we do need to make sure our numbers are where we want, because it's going to be hard to think you're going to raise any of those when you get in league play. But what's really big right now, especially the coach, Maneri being new, let's see who handles game days. He's seen them handle scrimmages. He's seen them handle getting to go on the road and play at the College of Charleston, that fall scrimmage. But now you really get to see when the uniforms are real, who handles those, and who handles when the stands are full. And even cooler, who handles it when they strike out? Can he be a guy I trust to get up there the next time? So as a coach, wins were imperative at this point. Coach Tanner, velocity guy, and he just fits that SEC look. 6'6", come in, JUCO guy from Blinn Junior College. I think he's the dude. I'm kind of wanting to figure it out, too, to be honest with y'all, because scrimmage games, they run in and out so much you don't know what they're maybe thinking of guys. But I'm a Roman Kimball fan. I think he's going to be a part of it. I've just watched him run into these scrimmages, throw strikes, get ground balls. I think he's going to be a big part of it. But I'm going to be excited, too, trying to learn some new guys and see where they fit in. I thought Matthew Becker was going to kind of be that back-end lone reliever, but this weekend he's a starter, so it gives some other guys that opportunity.
He is Stuart Lake. You'll hear him on the call for Gamecock Baseball this year alongside Derek Scott. Stuart, appreciate your time, and we'll be checking with you as the season goes along.
No, enjoy it, guys, and I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Stuart. Appreciate you, man.
Certainly excited for opening day tomorrow. Going to be out at the Village Idiot on Whaley Street from 12 until 3:45 for the Schroeder's Towing Roadshow, getting you set for the season opener against Sacred Heart. And we'll talk plenty about that as the morning goes along, and certainly tomorrow as well. It is the Gamecocks Club Hour presented by Krantz Cooling and Heating, Tyler and Wes, on your Thursday morning here on The Game.
All right, guys. This show brought to you by our friends over at Krantz Cooling. That's Krantz with a K, Cooling with a K. Of course, like we always tell you, head on over to krantzcooling.com. Or if you need to schedule an appointment, you prefer the phone, give them a call, 803-672-3224. Of course, family owned and operated for, pretty much ever. If you got AC problems, hopefully you don't. If you got heating problems, hopefully you don't. but they're going to take great care of you. They've been to Chris Clark's home and taken great care of him. Of course, maybe you want to just go ahead and get that peace of mind and not worry about things later on. Preventative maintenance is a great way to go ahead and make sure that you're covered. Maybe you want a more energy efficient unit to kind of bring down those monthly costs. They can do that for you as well. And if you are a business owner, commercial HVAC services from our friends at Krantz Cooling. Again, that phone number 803-672-3224 or the website Krantz with a K, coolingwithak.com.
And welcome back in. It is the Gamecock Club Hour presented by Krantz Cooling and Heating. Tyler Head and Wes Mitchell along with you on your Thursday. Don't forget about the Gamecock Traditions Over-Under contest on 1075thegame.com. Click on the contest tab and you can pick the over-under of the week for your chance to win a Gamecock Traditions gift card. This week, speaking of baseball, Ethan Petrie over-under 1.5 home runs over the course of the weekend against Sacred Heart. Not just one game, all 3 games. 1.5 home runs over-under. Select what you think the right answer is to see if you can win a Gamecock Traditions gift card. I'm going to pick over. And if Ethan Petrie hits more than 2 home runs, I got a good feeling that the Gamecocks are hopefully walking out with a series victory this weekend against Sacred Heart.
Well, do you get to get a gift card? Or?
I don't think I qualify. I don't think we're allowed to enter the contest.
The rules, but
I would have entered the Lori Lisa contest, and I don't think we're supposed to do that either.
Yeah. I would go over as well. Now, I think the beauty of baseball is, just one guy can't do it. Like they're going to have to pitch as well. That's what I'm very interested to see is, what does this staff look like? Do they have kind of those? Yeah, we maybe won't know this weekend, but I think we'll start to get an idea this week of some of the depth of this staff and who, how does it kind of play out? Stuart mentioned Jerzenbeck. He has not had the preseason that I'm sure he envisioned or wanted. So what role does he play this week, and can he springboard into, the more difficult part of the schedule? But yeah, Petrie has come into the season on fire by all indications. So you certainly hope he can just continue that and hit the ground running here for them and just be that bat in the middle of this order that we know he is capable of being.
Yeah, and Jack did a really good job the other day putting out the final stats from all these preseason, inter-squad scrimmages, and to no surprise, like you said, Ethan Petrie tearing the cover off the ball, hitting at 367. How many home runs did he hit here? A good 4 home runs, which led the team as well. So again, he's going to be hitting the ball long and far, and to be able to do that when it's still cold and kind of nasty outside, it's obviously going to improve as the weather starts to warm up and that ball starts to travel a little bit more. But somebody else that we talked about with Stewart a moment ago, Talmadge LeCroy, hit 500 through the spring so far, a couple home runs, several RBIs, just a lot of consistent hits, getting on base as well, which was kind of his MO last year. And his bat was without question solid at times, but the defense was what the issue was, especially when they were putting him at third base towards the end of the season. Now, as you talked about, moving back behind the plate. Now, look, Cole Messina is a hard guy to replace, as we just talked about a few minutes ago.
Yeah, you're not replacing him.
You're not replacing him, not only from a leadership standpoint necessarily, but also his production behind the plate, because he was just a one-of-one type of catcher for what this team was the past couple of years. So LeCroy is not going to be expected to be that same kind of guy, but hopefully, again, being behind the plate is a little more of a natural spot for him compared to some of the stuff he had last year struggling out in the field.
Yeah, and that was a position that Maneri was very open and honest about. That, I don't know if concerns is the word, but he was very curious to see how it plays out. And typically, if you are going to be a good baseball team, if you're going to be a consistent baseball team, if you're going to win close games, you have to have good play behind the plate. Like, I don't really think there's any way around it, because if you don't, teams are just going to take extra bases on you. They are going to put you in bad situations in terms of moving up. And that way, I feel like when you see teams that just lose a lot of close games, typically it comes down to the small things. And so that's something where you don't want to let the other team just take advantage of your catcher. So even if you're not going to have Cole Messina level play at catcher, can you make that just be a position that's at least neutral in terms of, it not hurting you? And I do think bringing in a guy like Max Coffer as well from A&M, who we had here on the show, that gives you, I would say, a little bit of a buffer there. Like, this guy has done it at a high level. Is it now? Max hit 333, so the bat has been there, but also in baseball, you don't want to get too caught up in small sample sizes. Like, you're talking about 30 at bats. That's still a relatively small sample size. But I think, getting back to the point, Max, at least can probably go out there and play solid defense for you. Even though I know Maneri said his defense in the scrimmages has not quite been what it was billed to be.
Right.
So, we'll see. You've got Ryan Bakes in the mix as well. So I think it is safe to say this is LeCroy's spot to lose. Like, he's going to get the first rights of your refusal. He's going to get the chance to go prove he can do it. And I think that's probably one of the bigger storylines for the first. You asked Stuart Lake, what are you looking for during these first series to get you ready for just the grind of the SEC? That catcher spot is one that I think you just still circle and you say, all right, can he go out there and be the guy? Is it more of a mix? Is it LeCroy catches 2 out of every 3? Is it like 50-50? What exactly does that look like?
Yeah, finding what combination works right, which is, again, why you play these, mid-major type teams these first couple weeks. You obviously have Clemson mixed in there as you do every single year, which would be a good litmus test before you get into to SEC play. But for us, from an observation standpoint, it's going to be a lot of learning these new guys on this team. And look, we've had a lot of them come through here on this hour, talking to guys like Hasmar and Dalton Mayshore and the likes of those. And when you look at the projected starting lineup for tomorrow, roughly half those guys are brand new. Nathan Hall coming over from Clemson, Hasmar as shortstop, Mayshore, Naraki, Scobie coming in as a true freshman. You still have your familiar names like Petrie, Kennedy Jones, Lee Croy, and Blake Jackson, but a lot of new mixed in with the same old guys from the past couple of years that, again, we as fans are going to have to get up to speed on as the season gets rolling here.
Yeah, I think Scobie being plugged right in as a true freshman speaks volumes to what Maneri thinks of him as a talent. And, you know, this is a pretty – now they're not, like you said, they're not all veterans in terms of their time at South Carolina, but this is a fairly veteran lineup in terms of just age and eligibility and all those things. But they clearly trust Scobie. He only hit 188 this time around, but you know, I went to one of the scrimmages back in the fall, and you ever hear the term hitterish?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
like a guy that just looks the part at the plate. Scobie, that's him. Like there's just something about him that you're like, this guy is a ball player.
he looks like a dude.
Yes, and he was playing third, you know, and you could tell he's kind of feeling his way out over there, and it was like he was a magnet. You know when you're kind of the new guy at a position, or we've all been in that spot where you're like, man, don't hit the ball to me, and then it's going to find you. Like if somebody's out there playing a spot they're not comfortable, the ball will find you.
Of course.
He got, you know, line drives. He got slow rollers he had to charge. He got backhands. He got plays in the 6-hole. I mean, he was getting tested like crazy. And he didn't make every play, but he hung in there. He made some great plays. He made some throws on the run. And you could just tell, you were like, man, once this guy gets completely comfortable, he's going to be just fine defensively. And then you look at the ability as a hitter. I'll be excited. Now, we know it can humble you at this level, but I'll be excited to see how quickly he can kind of get going over there in terms of just the raw ability that he has. And, man, I think it's going to be fascinating, to your point, Tyler. What does this lineup look like tomorrow? Mm-hmm. But then what does it look like? Because there's always a guy or two that's being counted on that maybe does get humbled a little bit, and there's always a guy or two that's not in the order that waits their turn, gets a chance, and to Stuart Lake's point, some guys, when the lights come on, they just handle it better than others, and they end up finding their way onto the field.
Well, everything gets rolling tomorrow again against Sacred Heart, 4 o'clock first pitch, pregame coverage starting at 3:45 right here on the game, and we'll dive plenty of this tomorrow as well, getting you set for the start of Gamecock baseball in 2025. Up next, though, as the Gamecock Club Hour presented by Krantz Schooling Heating rolls along, a significant piece of news coming down in reference to NIL and the latest on Title IX and what that could mean for revenue sharing coming up later on this year. We'll dive into that coming up next. It is the Gamecock Club Hour presented by Krantz Schooling Heating on your Thursday on the game.
All right, folks, you know what? I've been telling you about them for a full year now. It's our friends at Classic Roofing. They did a fantastic job at my home. They can do the same for you, whether it's making just small repairs or a completely new roof. You want to make sure that you're working with great people that are going to take care of you, and I promise you, they're going to do just that. Call them today, 803-590-7870, or head on over to classicroofingsc.com. Hit the little button at the top right-hand corner of the screen, free estimate. They're going to come out. They're going to take an extensive, thorough look at your roof, let you know, hey, there's some problem areas here we can go ahead and cut off and take care of. Or also, they're going to give you that peace of mind of, hey, this roof is fine. You got 10 years. You got 15 years maybe left on this thing. You don't have to plan for anything right now, but that peace of mind goes a long, long way. 803-590-7870 or classicroofingsc.com.
And welcome back in. It is the Gamecock Club Hour presented by Krantz Cooling and Heating. It's our Ed and West Mitchell along with you here on your Thursday on the game. Of course, we always try and keep up with the latest things going on in the world of NIL, and especially as we are on the cusp of revenue sharing going into effect here in the next couple months, assuming everything goes as we think it's going to go when it comes to the courts. Some significant news coming out yesterday from the Department of Education as they revoked the previous guidance on Title IX in reference to NIL, where they advised that revenue share does not have to be proportional with what Title IX usually is in reference to scholarships at all universities. So that means, kind of going back to something we've talked about in the past, that this $20.5 million amount that would be distributed to the athletes does not, according to this, have to be distributed evenly between men's and women's sports.
Yeah, and I think, Tyler, we thought that when that initial guidance went out, there was a lot, in my opinion, of kind of wait and see. Like it felt like a lot of people involved in the NIL space were kind of saying that maybe will not end up being the case. And now it appears that that will not be the case. And so I think, it certainly would have, if the original guidance had stayed in place, it would have completely changed how this thing was going to play out in terms of the percentages that schools are going to give to each sport. And, I think there is a slippery slope here. And I also think that you have to be careful in that football revenue does football brings in more revenue than every other sport.
Of course.
And that's not a men versus women thing. That's football brings in more revenue than every other men's sport as well.
Yes.
So I think you have to balance that these other sports deserve support as well, I should say, of if the football players are bringing in that revenue, what percentage of the revenue should then go back to them?
Well, and that again, there's so much about this we still don't know. And again, we're only a few months away from this being enacted, which is kind of the crazy part of all this is will there be guidelines or regulations on, okay, you have to go, split it up by X percentage based on what revenue is generated with the school or the sport as a whole in the grand scheme of the NCAA or something along those lines? Because right now we really don't know because, again, the majority of schools, like you said, are going to have the majority of their money, not all of it, but the majority of it tied up in football, and then it goes to men's basketball. And then depending on where you're at, women's basketball is probably like third on that list, or maybe some places baseball is even bigger. So, the risk of, the women's sports getting as little as possible based on however this pie is split up is certainly a real concern.
Yeah, and I think we have to find a balance in all this. And from what I understand, the SEC. And this stuff is such a moving target, right? It changes so often. I don't want to say anything definitively. The SEC, it sounds like, was going to set those percentages for all their member institutions. Now, what happens when one institution says, well, we want to do it differently?
Sure.
I don't know, but that was the thought, is that the SEC. So it may be a question at the SEC level. What gives the proper balance to making sure the other sports are taken care of and are getting a piece of the pie while also giving a bigger piece of the pie to the sport that is generating the most revenue. Yeah. And there can be a balance there. It doesn't have to be, in my opinion, it doesn't have to be 50-50 in terms of men and women's sports, but also it should not be, we're going to give everything to football. Yeah. I think there has to be a balance that takes care of the other athletes as well. But is the revenue share considered to be a genuine NIL thing? You know what I'm saying? Like, how is the revenue share? How is the revenue share presented? Is it that this is a share of what we're making off of your literal NIL? Then, and if it is in that case, then there is going to be a precedent for the sports that bring in more money to then be able to get a higher percentage of that share. But again, you don't want to give them all of it.
No, and that's a concern that's been voiced many times in reference to knowing that this was coming down the line is the future of a lot of not just women's sports, but also these non-revenue sports, quote unquote, a lot of the Olympic sports that schools have that, if they're not contributing to this overall fund of, revenue that's being shared, how long can they be sustainable for? Would schools still be willing to support and sponsor those? And look, every athletic director and conference commissioner at this point says, look, we're making sure we're going to, keep all sports and not trying to get rid of any. And they say that now, but again, a couple years down the road, when you see how these numbers really work and see what effect it has, you probably have a different conversation. Okay, do we really need volleyball? Because it's not really doing anything for us. And that's when sports cuts can start happening.
Yeah, and I still think Title IX was a great thing for the overall health of sports on campus, certainly the overall health of women's sports. And Title IX, in terms of the original version, basically said that your financial aid had to be 50-50 between men and women. And I think that absolutely should remain in place. That should remain the case. Now football has subsidized other sports in the model. Like, none of this was going directly to players, but football has subsidized other sports for decades. That's the case in high school athletics.
Sure.
So I don't know. We're in such a time of change still, that we don't know the effects of all this moving forward, and it could change by the hour.
It could. And Title IX went into effect, I believe, 1972, which, again, you're talking 50 years before, NIL ever became a thing. So there was nothing in the language of that to even think that was going to be possible. So, of course, there's nothing in there to protect it from not being a part of this as of now. So could it something that could have been restructured over time as you saw this coming? Maybe. But like you said, things are so fluid and changing across all fronts. And I feel like every time we bring in Mark and Jeremy, we're having a different conversation about what's changed since the last time they've come in. And this is just another example of what's going to happen with this whenever this all goes into effect. Again, assuming it's going to be very soon.
Yeah, for sure. And I feel like revenue share, like we have thought this thing was going to be locked in and agreed upon for a long time now, and it seems like there's more and more hurdles by the day.
To put it in perspective, we're 199 days away from South Carolina playing Virginia Tech to open the season, and we still don't know all the ins and outs of this.
Yes, while schools are, by the way, recruiting a roster that will be constructed under rules that actually don't even exist yet.
Yeah, you're dealing in hypotheticals. Well, we think it's going to be like this. We think it's going to be like that, and using your theoretical spending cap, how you see fit.
Yes.
Theoretically, so it's a lot. That's for sure.
Yes.
And again, we'll stay on top of this and react to it as it continues to change, to evolve before potentially fall of this year when it all goes into effect. We'll come back and wrap up the hour for the Gamecock Club Hour presented by Krantz Cooling and Heating. Gamecock softball off to a red-hot start. Talk about that a little bit coming up next. It is Gamecock Club Hour here on your Thursday on the Game. And welcome back in. It is the Gamecock Club Hour presented by Krantz Cooling Heating. Tyler and Wes along with you. We've got Chris back in here at the top of the hour, and we'll get any stories you guys have from Nashville for your couple days out and recap everything you guys missed over the course of the past couple days with Super Bowl and women's basketball and all that kind of stuff. Carolina calls tonight, by the way. Coach Barris at 6 o'clock here on the game in Columbia, 100.3 the game in Myrtle Beach. He reluctantly has to talk about yet another loss last night coming to Ole Miss as his team drops to 0-11 in conference play, and they head on the road, take on another top 5 team in Florida coming up on Saturday. Speaking of Florida, women's basketball taking on the Gators tonight at 7 o'clock over at Colonial Life Arena. Pregame coverage starting at 6:30 on our sister station 98.5
Kits
WOMG.
versus Kits.
Yes, there you go.
Pretty cool.
Very cool, very cool. And again, hopefully Carolina can get back on track after losing that game on Sunday to Texas. Softball, man, they are off to a red-hot start a week into their season. Of course, a week ago today, they had that huge comeback win against Virginia, scoring 5 runs in the bottom of the last inning, and they've kind of been on a heater since then. Beat Virginia the next day in 8 innings, and then, they've shut out their last 3 opponents in Providence, St. Francis, and East Carolina to be sitting here 5-0 to start the Ashley Chastain-Woodard era.
I mean, could you have had a better weekend? It looked like it was going to be an unceremonious start, and then they come from behind game 1. They come from behind game 2. Some just great moments to start the year. And, I think who knows what this season will have to come, right? And, we'll see what happens when they get an SEC play. But if there's one thing we already know about this team is that they have some grit about them. They have some guts. You don't come from behind down that much and back-to-back games against, a good opponent. This is not just a random team. You're playing Virginia, and to beat them twice in dramatic fashion to start the year, and then you add in wins over Providence, St. Francis, and East Carolina. A couple of blowout games in there over Providence and St. Francis. I got to imagine that Coach Chastain Woodard and that entire staff could not be more excited about how this thing started off. And I've always thought, especially when you have a new team in any sport, if you can have some of those kind of memorable wins where you maybe your back is against the wall and you go out and make something happen and win the game anyway, you feed off of that later on. And so when you're down in a big game later on, you've seen, hey, we can come back. We can make this happen. And, I think game 1 they started off maybe a little bit jittery. There were the errors. It was maybe there were some nerves, but certainly some excitement. And I hope that the fans tune in and get over there to that facility and check out what they have going on, because you can see the vision of what she wants this team to be.
And they're right back in action. Scheduled for today, assuming the weather lets up, against Georgia State. Coming up at 6 o'clock, we'll play them again tomorrow as part of the Carolina Classic. And then throughout the weekend, they'll take on Miami of Ohio twice, and then Appalachian State to wrap things up on Sunday. And they'll finally play somewhere other than Columbia, all the way at the beginning of 2 weeks from now, actually, against Charlotte, the former team of Coach Chastain Woodard on that Tuesday. And then they'll be on the road at Duke after that. So getting around a little bit towards later of the month, but exciting start for Gamecock softball, which hopefully is going to translate to it for an exciting start for the new Paul Maneri era for Gamecock baseball coming up tomorrow with Sacred Heart on deck.
Yeah, exciting stuff for both of those sports, and maybe we'll talk a little baseball during Gamecock Club Hour too. But what are you most interested to see with this team, Tyler? I know we won't know. We'll know a little bit this weekend, but your baseball, I feel like you're gathering a little bit of data each time out.
A little bit, and I go back to what we talked with Stewart at the beginning of the hour. Just a good defense. Again, from what Maneri said, it sounds like ball's going to be getting put in play a lot based on the pitching that they have as of right now. So just sound, crisp defense, and it sounds like Maneri's the guy that really focuses on the fundamentals and has drilled it into those guys' heads. So you just, because the errors became such a consistent thing, especially towards the end of last season, that's aggravating when you're watching, that you hope hopefully they can clean up for this year.
Are errors in baseball equivalent to making a lot of unforced turnovers in basketball? It feels like there's some carryover there, because you just like, it's one of those things that the numbers aren't equivalent, but if you have if you have a lot of errors, you're like, you just can't do that.
I think they're comparable because, again, it goes back to fundamentals of dribbling and passing and all those kind of things. Like, these are basic things that we do, guys. Come on, why are we having these kind of mistakes? And we'll get into men's basketball a little bit coming up in the next hour because you want to beat your head against the wall with some of the things that you see with them pretty much every single game.
Yeah, and I feel like when you make errors or have too many turnovers, that's something where you put your head down or you lose the momentum of the game. And to just not do the little things right in baseball grinds on this fan base a bit, I think. So I in a lot of ways, every coach is different. But there is a little bit of a Ray Tanner vibe from Paul Mainieri. Kind of the old school, like, I'm going to tell it how it is. And I think it's going to be good for this program. The question is, from a big picture standpoint, just do they have enough overall talent in a league that is freaking loaded? Yeah,
it's not going to be easy. Again, you get started in conference play a month from tomorrow with Oklahoma, and then it's off to the races for tough competition after tough competition as we're used to in the SEC. And we'll see what year one of the Mainieri era holds, which of course we'll talk about plenty later on this morning, as well as going in tomorrow, leading you into opening day. And again, Schroeder's Towing Roadshow live at the Village Idiot on Whaley Street. It'll be me. It'll be Jay. Jack will be there. Cloninger's going to come through. It's going to be a great time getting you set for opening day for Gamecock baseball. They'll do it for the Gamecock Club Hour presented by Krantz Cooling and Heating. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs coming up next on your Thursday here on The Game. Survived Nashville and made it back here in one piece. Chris, I'll go ahead and tell you, you're on the wrong microphone. Switch to number 4. Or 2. That works too. There we go.
My light was on.
I know. It still doesn't work, though.
Oh, okay.
So
that's not my fault.
I know it's not. Just letting you know. I know it's been a few days. Make sure you know everything's at.
So Chris is not on the wrong mic. That mic just doesn't work.
It just doesn't work.
I chose the wrong one.
He was going to attempt to talk into one that didn't work, so I was giving him forewarning.
Did you tell Tyler that we passed by his hometown?
No.
As I I figured Wes had a rant on me making us drive to Nashville.
Oh, how did that go?
Not fun on the way back.
I have no comments on the matter.
What happened on the way
I
back?
have no comments on the matter.
Oh, it just took a long time.
Okay.
That's all it was.
Which
But
I
we did-
told Chris would be the case. Okay, apparently I do have comments, but
You're right. You're right.
Need some
took a while.
group therapy here?
No.
no, we're good.
No,
I just was like, Chris, man, we can fly. He's like, nah.
Listen, he's
Next year.
10 and 2. You know, speed limit.
Next year
Get
we
there in
will-
one piece.
There's no going the speed limit in that god awful interstate when you're stopped.
Covington's like before Atlanta.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like right on the edge of Metro.
See, that would have been no. Either way, we would have gotten in it. Yeah. I mean, it was just.
What time did you guys go through Atlanta?
Well, we had timed it up nicely to where we were going through Atlanta from like 4 to 5 p.m.
Perfect. Perfect.
So it was good. It was good. We had a good time though. We're back here. That's all that matters.
What went down in Nashville when you finally did make it there?
Strategery.
Strategery.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was it.
We learned some things,
Yeah, we learned some things.
new tools, new ideas.
That's right.
All right.
Yeah.
We're going to be applying them on the show.
That's what matters. Well, you guys missed a few things over the course of the past couple of days. Super Bowl on Sunday. I think did we all pick the Chiefs, or you weren't here on Friday? I think Wes and I both picked the Chiefs to win. Tight game as we kind of expected. Whew, blowout city.
What we're learning is when it comes to the NFL stuff, if I pick a team, just go the complete opposite. Yes. You know, we won't take much time on the Super Bowl. Nobody cares anymore. But, dude, talk about it does go back. Hey, man, if you can run the football, if you can not turn the ball over, and if you have a stud defensive line, as we saw during the best era in South Carolina athletics, as we saw for this defense last year, if you can get pressure up front, you can negate a lot of other things. And add all those things together, and you saw the result. I mean, even the score didn't show just how dominant of an effort, because the Chiefs scored late against the second team, and put Mahomes over the prize pick number, which I think probably ticked off a lot of people. And just boring game though, frankly.
Well, I'll tell you what stood out to me was we knew the Eagles' defense was really good, but I did not anticipate just a complete, Patrick Mahomes being not only like a non-factor, but a negative, in how he played. And that's because of how they played up front. Chiefs just had no answer. Couldn't block them, and that's what it came down to. And, I do think there are some parallels between, you look at 2023, South Carolina did not have the type of year they wanted. Defensively, it was certainly a struggle as far as, you always think Wes always talks about rush and cover. South Carolina couldn't really do that in 2023, particularly in the first half of the year. And then you go to 2024, the season that we just saw, and they were one of the best teams in the country at rush and cover, right? With, some personnel tweaks and getting Dylan Stewart and Kyle Kennard, having some depth. A lot of it was the same guys. It was the same coaching staff, right? But, from year over year, you can change those things. You look at the Eagles, Vic Fangio, he did a phenomenal job, and he's been around forever in the league, like 4 decades. First ring, well-deserved, and they were not a good defensive team last year. They
basically went worst to first.
They were 31st in third down, 30th in points allowed, 31st in pass defense. Yeah, and like you said, Wes, they're first in yards allowed, first in pass defense, first in first downs allowed, third on third down. They were tremendous. And, some of it was personnel. A lot of it was just kind of getting back to basics. And, look, we talk about talent acquisition a lot. The Eagles wouldn't be that good if they didn't have dudes. They have a bunch of them up front. South Carolina had a bunch. But coaching also matters, too. You got to have players, and then you got to have the right type of development. So they kind of had the best of both worlds in all aspects, were able to stage that huge turnaround. And, they took down the Titan that has been the Chiefs as of late.
Halftime show, yes, no, in the middle.
That was your.
Yeah,
They picked you that year. You know what I'm saying?
It's different for everyone, and you're never going to satisfy all the masses. As you know, of course, in Super Bowl, the Chiefs go down. A dynasty that was on the cusp of maybe three-peating there. Earlier on in the day, women's basketball taking on Texas, huge top 5 showdown once again, suffering their first a regular season conference loss since December of 2021, which is an unbelievable sentence to say to a team that they just manhandled a couple weeks ago. They returned the favor in Austin on Sunday.
Yeah, and it goes to show you home court advantage does still matter. And Carolina was down in this game for a lot of the time and just battled back. I kind of thought that they're so Carolina's so strong-willed. I kind of thought they were going to steal it from Texas at the end. That was obviously not the case. I do want why is Texas ahead of South Carolina in the AP poll?
Recency bias.
That's probably the best, the simplest explanation.
Because Carolina's resume is still better.
Yeah.
And it's a split.
It's a split. The other game didn't take place a year ago.
No.
And the other game was a blowout.
Yeah.
So why would Texas be ahead of South Carolina?
Good question.
Yeah, it's just recency bias. That's all it is. I mean,
or bias like the Carolina at this point is the Chiefs. Like
fatigue, like Dawn Staley said.
Yeah, I think people, some people, maybe are just tired of seeing them win.
Well, 1.3 million people tuned into that game. It's the most watched women's game of the entire year. So they're doing enough right to make people want to watch them at least.
But some people watch, maybe just wanting them to
hate
lose.
Watch.
Yeah.
But hey.
Yeah, can they
be beaten?
Yeah.
But when you set the standard, you are the standard right now.
Sure.
So
you're at the top of the mountain.
Everybody's out
swinging
to get
at you.
Yeah.
And again, doesn't really change anything right now because you're still a projected number 1 seed. You still control your own destiny in the regular season. If they both win out, it could come down to a coin flip to decide the top seed for the SEC tournament. And again, still got to go through a couple more games before you get to that point. But for the most part, didn't change a whole lot in what the trajectory of the season.
I do think we've seen in the two which they're last season you didn't have you could go through and say well this hypothetically could cause South Carolina problems. They didn't end up losing, right? It never really factored into that point to where it caused a loss. But I do think in looking at the two losses, and Dawn Staley, I think, said it very well the other night during her call-in show. Somebody, why don't we do this? Well, we're, lost 2 games, 22-2 or something, pretty good. The way we do things is pretty good, right? But I think that what we've seen in the UCLA and Texas game is, number one, the other team has to play their A game, and South Carolina has to be off. If South Carolina, plays their A, I would venture to say, B game. Even if you play your A, you're probably not beating them, right? So you almost got to kind of hope for an off night. But secondly, with Betts at UCLA, with Texas having some size, especially with Kyla Oldacre, right? We saw her in game 1 of this series in Columbia.
Grabbed like 90 rebounds.
90 rebounds, 80 of them offensive. But no, it was seriously like 16 rebounds. I think 12 were offensive. And she had another huge impact on this game. And so what was the biggest question about this team coming into the year? They've still got a lot of girls they can throw at you who are very talented, right? Fagan, Edwards, Kitts, etc. But you don't have that presence of a Cardoso in there where the other team looks at it and says, we have absolutely no answer. We have absolutely nobody like that. So what South Carolina has in the post this year is a little bit more by committee, a little less dominant in terms of like that size, shot blocking ability, being able to handle somebody like Betts or Oldacre. So that's kind of, there are probably only a couple or a few teams that are actually built to challenge South Carolina, and 2 of them are on the schedule, Texas, UCLA. It's going to be hard for anybody else. I still think you still feel really good about this team, right? But they do, that has actually reared its head a little bit throughout the season.
Are there, all right, so you're not going undefeated. We already knew that.
Yep.
South Carolina has an undefeated season in terms of their history. We saw it last year. You were able to check that box. Assuming you still are a 1 seed, assuming you still can even win the SEC championship, are there some positives to losses?
Think you can look yourself in the mirror a little bit better and say you're not invincible, which I'm sure Coach Staley did plenty of that on Monday at practice, though maybe she felt better because the Eagles won the Super Bowl. But still, there was a lot of, hey, you're not invincible. We need to get better in these areas. And, you know, we saw a positive after the UCLA loss of how they bounced back and proceeded to beat the next couple of teams, including mauling a ranked Iowa State team. So we'll see how that translates starting tonight against Florida.
Yeah, I think there are some positive. I think, guys, some of these streaks that they've been on, which are incredible, and you want to see those streaks go forever, but they're not going to. And I don't know. And maybe I'm an idiot. You're not thinking about the streak while you're on the court trying to win the game, but I do think all those streaks and it being talked about all the time. The one that's still going is the home winning streak.
Yes,
they bring a certain amount of pressure to continue to win, and you know, there's a little bit of it can be freeing to take that off. Now you're just going to play basketball. You're not trying to, if I miss this shot, we're going to lose, and then this streak is over. I don't know. We'll see. There is some value to, like you said, knowing you're mortal. You can be beaten, but just go play free, and let's see what happens. Still got a great shot to win the whole thing again.
Again, next game coming up tonight, 7 o'clock, pregame coverage at 6:30 on our sister station, 98.5 WOMG against the Florida Gators over at Colonial Life Arena. Men's basketball in action last night. Oh, wash, rinse, repeat. Another loss in the SEC. We'll dive into that coming up next. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs here on the game. And welcome back in. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler West Chris along with you here on your Thursday. Tonight at 6 o'clock here on the game in Columbia and 100.3 the game out in Myrtle Beach. You'll hear from Coach Paris on Carolina Calls, as unfortunately he has to talk about yet another loss in conference play as number 19 Ole Miss comes into town last night and escapes with a 72-68 win, as once again Carolina plays another ranked team to within 5 points, but comes up short at the very end when it's all said and done.
Did you watch the game, Tyler?
I did.
What were you thinking late in the second half?
What's going to go wrong this time? What fundamental mistake is going to happen that we're going to be talking about the next day? Turnovers, free throws. Kind of knew free throws were already rough on the night, but something was going to happen, and it ended up being, driving to the basket, losing the hand of the ball. And I give credit to Zach Davis for getting a hand on that thing and trying to get it to Jamari Thomas, but it just went the other direction, out of bounds, and game's over.
So, let me be completely honest. I was still driving for the first half of the game.
Okay.
Thanks to Chris.
Who's playing that?
So I was listening. By the way, our guys, Casey Mann and Derek Scott, fantastic job. I felt like I was there. Man, they were giving it to the refs. I was loving it. But going into this game, I had a feeling. No analytics reason whatsoever. I just had a feeling. I was like, I feel like this is going to be the day. They're going to just sneak up and win one.
Okay.
For most of the first half, Ole Miss is hitting everything. Got a guy that's shooting 18%, hitting three-pointers out there. And I was like, well, I guess that gut feeling was wrong. And then as they chipped away, and I watched the final probably 10 minutes on TV, it's like, man, this might be the day. And they didn't really turn the ball over much this time. It was the same. It's kind of like when you watch a show or a movie where it's the same movie, but they change some of the details along the way, like a money grab sequel.
Yeah.
That the big picture is all going to end up the same, but all the little details in the middle play out a little bit differently.
Well, most sequels are like these days.
Yeah, this is not the same game, but just the same result. And I mean, I don't even know what you do or say, or all I'll say is credit to the players. I think not everybody, but a lot of people have just been waiting on them to pack it up. They are still fighting. There's no give up. They're still fighting. They're in there. It still matters to them. I credit them for that. I mean, it's going to be a lost year at this point. That's been apparent for a while, and I feel bad for them, man, because they've just found ways to lose.
Yeah, the end of the game was actually took a little bit of a different approach for me once it got in range for South Carolina. I actually, and maybe, against my better judgment or against what we've seen, I wasn't thinking what's going to go wrong. I was just kind of watching because I really did get the sense they might actually close this thing out. But then, of course, Ole Miss goes up again by, 3? Carolina gets a basket. You're going, okay, you got to get a stop. You got to go get – but it was like the last, 3 possessions of the game, I think were just a perfect microcosm, really, of what we've seen, to where you're going down to try to go up, you turn the ball over. And at that point, Tyler, I'm going, all right.
There it is.
But you turn the ball over, you get down, you play. And Carolina's defense down the stretch, they made Ole Miss play a lot of one-on-one hero ball, and Ole Miss made some hero plays. And they had one on that, right? And that's where kind of the this team, to be quite frank, has had some bad luck to go along with the largest reason, and don't say, Chris is saying this team's just unlucky, that's why they hadn't won a game. That's not what I'm saying. But if you watch the games, they have had some bad luck in there. Some things that have not gone their way. If you go undefeated in a season or if you go defeated, you're going to either have some good luck or bad luck that play into either side of that.
Sure.
And so a lot of it has been their own doing, of course. But they had some bad luck. They played really good defense on that last Ole Miss possession, or the one that put them, kind of put it more out of range. after the first turnover, and the guy made a tough shot. I mean, a double clutch, contested that's a good shot. That's a tough shot. We're talking about it over and over on the broadcast. Then you go back, okay, we can either get a 3 or we can try for a 2 and then go foul and extend the game, turn the ball over again. So just like a complete microcosm of turnover, bad luck, tough play, you give up, another turnover, and then by that point, for all intents and purposes, it's kind of
Out of bounds on the one late play where South Carolina saved it and he caught it right on the baseline.
didn't look close enough.
I didn't even look at that, honestly.
I mean, it doesn't matter, but I just thought they might.
Where CMB's trying to pass it to, I think, Zach Davis.
Yes.
Yeah, I didn't even look at his feet, to be honest with you.
He intercepted it like right on the baseline. And I thought the announcers were going to maybe be like, hey, look at the. I mean, I don't know. I'm grasping at straws here, I guess. But yeah. It's just, I feel like we've run out of things to say about it at this point.
You're right. We've talked in circles about this over and over again, and it's agonizing because, again, you see the ability. They are obviously trying their best and putting themselves in situations late, but something about when that clock gets under 2 minutes, it feels like the wheels fall off no matter how good you've played up to that point, and especially at home against ranked teams. You just can't close the deal. And, you know, you're 7 games left in the regular season, and we're sitting here saying, gosh, I hope they can find a way to win one of them so you don't have the Missouri season like last year and go 0-18 in conference play. Jordan Butler is still searching for his first ever SEC win.
Yeah.
Get this man a win, please.
Please.
I think he's at 0-30 now. Because they've been 0-18, lost in the tournament.
Yeah.
So, yeah, 0-30.
It's going to come. I actually, they're going to find a win. Running out of time.
I hope so.
But they're going to find a win.
Yeah,
y'all are just looking at me like.
I mean, I don't disagree with you, but I'm like, I hope. We'll see.
Yeah, I feel like we're going to keep, like, I do agree with you. You're like, all right, at some point, like the law of averages, like, you know, that could have very easily gone the other way last night. And there's several games like that, you know? And so I feel like they'll get one at some point. They are running out of time. It's got to come soon. Otherwise, we're just going to continue saying that. This team's good enough to beat. It's not like they've gone out the entire year and just they have gotten blasted in some games, of course. But in a lot of games and against really good opponents, which the vast majority of the league is really good this year, you know, they've been close. What are they, 3-0 against ACC teams?
Yeah.
This year?
Yep.
You know, like, it's not like this team's incapable of winning a basketball game. I think it's been the perfect storm of certainly not as good as last year, certainly a flawed, like there are issues that we've seen play out throughout the year. You're playing an extremely difficult schedule, and basketball has not bounced your way, to be quite frank, on several occasions.
Thankfully, baseball gets rolling coming up tomorrow, and we'll talk a little bit about our expectations for year number 1 under Paul Maneri coming up next. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs here at the game. Welcome back in. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler, West, and Chris, along with you on your Thursday, a day away from opening day for Gamecock baseball. Wes and I talked with Stuart Lake in the last hour to preview tomorrow's opener against Sacred Heart. And, man, it feels like just yesterday we were talking about the Maneri hire. We've had so many of these baseball players come through for the Gamecock Club Hour, get their thoughts and learn a little bit more about them ahead of this season. And tomorrow, finally get head on the field and see what the Paul Maneri era is going to be about.
Yeah, I'm excited. Like we talked about, it's always fun when there's a new coach. Talking about a legend, obviously. And I thought it was fun talking to Stuart Lake, Chris. He basically said, Stuart's been on all sides of the game. He's been a head coach. He's been an SEC assistant. And he's coached against Paul Maneri. And he was like, Paul Maneri was one of those guys, even if you were coaching against him, you wanted to go across before the game when everybody was kind of settling in and chatting with each other. You wanted to go shake his hand. Like, you wanted to be like, I met Paul Maneri. And so he brings a certain level of just resume to, for lack of a better word, to the program, and cachet and the ability to tell it like it is. And I think sometimes new coach comes in, if they're not proven, if, maybe it's a young guy, it's hard in 2025 to be hard on the guys and keep their attention. And so I think with Maneri, what you have is a guy who is able to walk the line. He's incredibly positive overall, but also he tells it like it is. He says if he has a concern about a position. He says if a guy has played his way out of being a starter. He let you don't wonder where you're at in his eyes if you play for Paul Maneri. So I think we've heard him be very honest about some concerns about the team, and I think we've been very honest about him saying, look, this team is not going to finish last or second to last in the SEC. And so I think it's going to be fascinating to see exactly what this team is when you look at the fact that you've got a lot of new pieces on this roster.
A lot of new pieces, which, is one reason for, I think, excitement, but also, optimism, right? You've got a young guy in KJ Scobie. You've got Henry Kazmar. You've got Dalton Mayshore as a JUCO guy. Nathan Hall, Nolan Naraki, a couple of Clemson guys. Naraki, there seems to be a lot of excitement about because he seems to be somebody who's got some legit, like, hey, this could be like a high MLB draft type of guy. So new players. But I think Maneri himself, as you were just alluding to, like, is a reason for optimism because you don't find a lot of coaches who have done what he's done in his career. He's won a national title. He's been to Omaha 6 times. He's been to Omaha at 2 different schools. If he can make it to South Carolina, that'd be the 3rd. He's won 6 SEC tournament titles, right? So he's seen a lot in the game, and I think some of what he's going to bring, seems like it was needed, right? Anytime you have a coaching change, that means that ultimately you need to do some things differently. And with his resume, his experience level, I think just the way, to your point, that he just administers the program, I think a lot of that is needed. I also think, Wes, that there are, and Jack Veltri had a great piece on Gamecock Central, reasons for optimism, reasons for concern heading into this season. There's some things that they're going to have to prove throughout the course of the year. One of them's just the defense, right? It was a problem last year. Catcher, which has been outlined by Paul Maneri as a question mark. It would be a question mark even if you felt good about it because of who you lost. Mm-hmm. I mean, Cole Messina, he was one of the best in the country, not only as a hitter, as a leader, but he can mow guys down on the base pass. You might lose some of that. The SEC and this schedule overall is going to be incredibly difficult. I would add to what Jack said, are there some questions that have to be answered on the pitching staff? Probably so. Not that you feel bad about that, but we just need to see some of that play out to be able to properly assess, again, against, great competition that they're going to play.
Well, and do they have those elite guys, I think is the question. Like, I think they have some guys that are going to go get outs in general. But in this league, and Paul Maneri has talked about it, in this league, you go into Friday nights, and most of the time, you're facing a guy on the other side who is going to have a chance to play professional ball.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
The guys who are just pitchers, and what I mean by that, the guys who just kind of have to have that pitchability and, are throwing low 90s and just have 4 or 5 different pitches. Those guys are more and more few and far between. And it's these days, it's this guy can run it up to 96 and just is electric. And so you have more and more guys that are electric that you're facing off with. Can South Carolina, can they find like a Blake Cooper, a guy that can just go out there and get outs for you? And maybe it's not as pretty. Maybe it's not as electric. You're not talking about, oh, this guy's going to be a top 3 rounder in the MLB draft, but they just get outs. And I think it's still the case that Eli Jersenbeck is, you hear people talk about him, and even hearing what Stuart Lake said, I asked him about the starting pitchers. I didn't bring up Jersey at all. And he said, don't forget about Jersenbeck. Opportunities. Let's say he gets in the games, takes advantage of those opportunities, then maybe he takes that Friday or Saturday role and becomes a guy for you. That opens up some other things for you. We'll see what Jake McCoy does. Jake McCoy has great stuff as well, isn't as experienced. Is Jake McCoy able to consistently give you outs? That, to me, maybe opens up a Matthew Becker to just become your weapon. And if he pitches the way I think he's going to, then maybe he becomes a little bit more, hey, we're going to throw Becker when we need him as opposed to just the starter. But right now, excited for Becker that he's going to get a chance to go out and be an opening weekend starter for Carolina.
Yeah, and with Jersenbeck, like, that there's talent there. It's not a question of, well, maybe he just isn't good. Like, he's good enough, right, from a talent standpoint. And he's done some things where you have kind of that baseline of knowing that it's in there. There have been guys in the past that have not been consistent or even outright struggled before a year, and then they go and have a good year. Like, remember, I think this is his freshman year, so it's a little different because of the inexperience. But remember Ethan Petrie, basically, the way he put it, couldn't hit, in a preseason, and then he goes out and does, what he's done his entire career. And so Petrie's super talented. Jersenbeck has talent. I agree with you, Wes. He's one of those guys that's kind of a question mark or like a wild card, like an X factor, where if he can step up and you get what he's capable of, it turns into a much better, I think, team.
Again, tomorrow, Schroeder's Towing Roadshow over at the Village Idiot on Whaley Street from 12 until 3:45, leading you straight into pregame coverage of the Gamecocks taking on Sacred Heart tomorrow afternoon at 4 o'clock out at Founders Park. We'll come back and wrap up today's edition of the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour. Welcome back in. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler West and Chris along with you on your Thursday. We'll do plenty more baseball preview coming up tomorrow, getting you set for the Gamecocks and Sacred Heart starting off the Paul Maneri era. But we never missed the opportunity. Shout out to guy Pete Limbo, coming off of a strong first year as the head coach at Buffalo, 9-4, won the Bahamas Bowl to close out the season, and the other day received a contract extension through the 2029 season. Also got a raise as well, though I did not think those numbers have been put out just yet. But again, Pete Limbo, great first year at Buffalo, and continuing to obviously show love to South Carolina his time here under Coach Beamer and do his own thing out there as well.
Gamecock Central Takeover alum Pete Limbo.
Friend of the show. One
of our favorites, and well-deserved, man. What he did, nothing short of amazing, and well-deserved raise and extension there for Pete. And I believe I saw his son got a job. Where's he at, Chris? He got a job in football.
He was at TCU, and he's getting hired somewhere else, East Carolina.
So
to be the director of scouting. So it will be it'll be a promotion in terms of the actual job that he's doing.
Yeah. So I mean, what a week for the Limbo fam, and also Chris, I'm gonna give a shout out to my guy Mark Orfe, who people maybe don't remember. He was on staff here in an off the field role at South Carolina years ago, has been the Rutgers cornerbacks coach, and according to a lot of reports right now from the Texas media folks, including Anwar Richardson, who I think said it first, he is going to be hired at Texas to replace Blake Gideon, who got the Georgia Tech defensive coordinator job.
That's right.
And Blake Gideon has a connection to Will Muschamp, and there was talk of him maybe getting a role at South Carolina years ago. So lots of movement in the college football world among guys who have connections to South Carolina.
Yeah, Pete's done just such a good job throughout his coaching career, just generally, right? But, this is a guy that I think last season, when his 16th year as a head coach, been at multiple programs, and he's just been really consistent. He's only had, I think, like 3 losing seasons in 16 years of coaching, and at places that I think have not been, here's the keys to a Ferrari, basically, in terms of what they are. I mean, he's been at Lehigh and Elon and Ball State, now Buffalo. There's certainly been across some of those schools, some lean years, and he's just always brought, I think, a lot of consistency to those programs. And, when he was at Ball State, he had a 9-win season, a 10-win season. Lehigh, he never, won less than 8 games. Elon, 1 losing season, had a 8 and 9-win season. So he's just been a really, really good coach. And I mean, we know that about Pete, right? Like, the guy's a football coach. He knows what he's doing, not just as a special teams guy, which he's amazing, but really good head coach as well.
I believe 9 was a program record for Buffalo this past year by winning the Bahamas Bowl.
In year 1?
Yeah.
Pretty good.
Pretty impressive.
Do you know what position Pete Limbo played in college? Anybody know?
Is he a lineman?
What kind?
Defensive?
Wrong. Wes, do you know?
Well, an offensive lineman?
That's correct.
Process of elimination there.
Played center at Georgetown.
Okay.
And what year?
He graduated in 1991. So
those positions have changed
a little bit. I've never been around Pete Limbo. What's the size?
Not a big guy.
Not a big guy.
You would not look and go, that guy definitely played offensive line a while back.
Would you? See,
I'm not sure I even believe you.
Did you guys see during the Super Bowl when they did the comparison of the Chiefs O-line versus the Packers O-line?
It was like 100. On average, 100 pounds difference, I think.
100 pounds difference and like 5 or 6 inches. No, I think it was the Eagles O-line. Compared to the first one from Super Bowl I. The average Packer was like 250 and like 6'3". That's a linebacker now.
Let's see if we can find an old Georgetown football media guide or something. If they probably don't have a digital one from 1991. Yeah, it says he was a team captain, played center.
You don't hear too much about Georgetown's football team. Basketball, yes, but football, not so much.
If he played center for the basketball team, we would all have known. And I don't. You asked about Pete's he did not play center on the basketball team. I don't think he's tall enough.
Doesn't mean he can't hoop.
He can hoop, but he's not.
He's not playing center.
He's not center.
True.
Not center for Georgetown either.
Unless you just got great ups.
Their last digital media guide is from 2000, so I can't. I was trying to effort a picture of Pete Limbo as an offensive lineman, but I can't find one. Sorry.
The sizes of guys has changed so much. That was obviously insane going back to the original, first Super Bowl. But we had we've told this story before, but a couple of years ago, some former Gamecocks who played during the Spurrier era were out there at Carolina's camp, and Leggett was walking around. They're like, "Who's that?" Like, "That's Leggett." Like, "That's a wide receiver." Like, he's bigger than our linebackers, and these are guys that played during the Spurrier, not that long ago. So, I think if you were looking at a graph, it's going up even steeper in the last maybe 20, 25 years.
Well, and that makes you think, okay, we're making that comparison from, 10, 15 years ago to now? What's it going to look like in 2040? What's the average weight of an offensive lineman going to be then?
You would think there's a limit on this, but
you would think.
But man, I don't know. Lord, what are they putting in the water?
It'd be 7'5", 500 pounds, but then they'll run like 4'4".
Yeah, they'd be
by that point.
They're already freaks of nature. They'll be freakier freaks of nature.
Yeah, the guys that played when you go watch like the old college football games or NFL games, like back then you were looking around going, these guys are big and fast, and now it's just like those guys are slow and small,
Yeah.
I do think the rate of expansion has to slow somewhat.
Who knows?
But every year, they
Can't
get bigger,
stop
faster.
science, man.
Yeah.
That'll do it for the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Halftime show. Myself, Terry Ford, up next as your Thursday rolls along here on the game.
Lunchtime here on the game. I'm hungry. You probably are too. 15 different Firehouse Subs locations all around the Midland. That's where you can go satisfy that Firehouse Subs craving.